Hello, and thank you for joining today's Rural Scale Up Grant informational webinar. I am Lisa Siebert with the Center for Rural Revitalization at Iowa Economic Development Authority. As a reminder, we are recording this webinar and we'll be posting it on the website sometime next week. I will also be sending a link of the recording to everyone who registered, whether you attended or not. So stay tuned for that. We will have an opportunity for questions at the end. If you have any over the course of the presentation, please drop your questions in the chat and I will get to them at the very end. If you have any technical difficulties, you can also drop those in the chat and I will try to get to them as quickly as possible. Today, we're going to be talking about the timeline, application timeline, a program overview of the Rural Scale Up, and then go into the scoring rubric and application questions before opening it up for your questions at the very end. So the applications are currently available on iowagrants.gov. The deadline is 11:59 p.m. on August 30th. The funding notification will be made by email on October 15th, 2023, or by October 15th. And that is when the funding period starts as well. So the funding period is October 15th of this year through June 30th of 2025. That's significant because all grant dollars and match dollars must be spent within that contract time frame. So something to keep in mind as you are thinking about your timeline for your project. As I mentioned, the grants applications are live through iowagrants.gov. You must submit through iowagrants.gov, but the guidelines and additional information on the webinar, such as past recipients, is all available on the website. So the Rural Scale Up Grant Program aims to support the replication and spread of creative solutions that are addressing current issues and challenges faced by rural communities. This program was a direct outcome of lessons learned from our Rural Innovation Grant. So we found after a few years of having that grant open that there was a real desire and need to replicate the best practices that we have been supporting through that program. As replication is actually an element of the Rural Innovation Grant, it just made sense for us to then have a program that supported that replication piece. So hence the Rural Scale Up Grant. Last year was our first year launching this program. This year is very similar. And we have found that there are essentially two directions that Scale Up can go. So the first direction is if you are doing a program or have a project in your community or region that you want to grow, so either take it to the next level or spread it to another community, but you as the organization are going to do it, that is one option. And the other option is if you live in a community and you really like something that your neighboring community did or someone on the other side of the state, and you want to replicate it into your community, that is the other direction. So both of those kind of paths are eligible ways to go about this grant program. Last year, we only funded a few, I believe 3, Rural Scale Up grants, and I believe 2 of them were growing what was already working well by the organization that was doing it to another community. And one of them was taking an idea from actually an urban community and bringing it to their community. So funding for this one is a maximum grant request of $20,000 and a minimum of $5,000. We do have a required 1-to-1/2 cash match. What that means is if you are applying for a $20,000 grant, you must have at least $10,000 in cash match. That must be secured at the time of application, and you will need to upload a document confirming that you have that funding available. This is a reimbursement grant program. So what that means is that you have to spend money in order to make a claim and be reimbursed for it. You can do this in installments. You don't have to wait until the very end of your project. And all claims are made through Iowa Grants. You must submit claims that are at least for $1,000. So what that would look like is you would go on Iowa Grants and submit an invoice of what was paid for, proof of that payment, so maybe a receipt or a canceled check, and then a brief status report. And the amount would need to be at least $1,500 because for each claim, you have to balance the match with the request, and the request must be $1,000. So you would then need $500 for your match. We also have some reporting requirements. Quarterly reports these are both done through Iowa Grants. The quarterly reports are essentially an opportunity for us to touch base on the project, make sure that things are moving forward, that you haven't hit any major roadblocks, for you to ask any questions, but we keep it relatively simple. The final report is a little bit more robust. It again does ask for a summary of the project, but it also asks for the entire project budget. So not only your match and your grant award, but also if you had any in-kind or if you had any costs that were outside of that contract period, we would capture that. We also ask you to include any documents such as photos, news clippings, things like that. Because this is within the Center for Rural Revitalization, there is a population requirement. So all projects or programs must exist in and benefit a city in Iowa with a population of 20,000 or fewer, and not immediately adjacent to a community of 40,000 or more. If you have a county-wide project, then you would instead need to meet the requirement of one of the 88 least populous counties in Iowa. This is not where you need to meet both of those criteria. It's if you are applying for a project or program in a city or a project or program in a county. So it's kind of one or the other. Applicants is fairly wide open, as you can see by this list. That is because we recognize that solutions to challenges can come from a variety of different partners. So essentially anything except for an individual is able to apply for this grant. A caveat to the applicants: the applicant does not need to meet the population requirements. So just where the project or program is going to exist needs to meet those requirements. But say the applicant is, for example, ISU. ISU is wanting to do a project in a rural community, and they decide to be the applicant and the manager of the funds. They would be able to do that as long as the community they were working with and in and the project was going to stay in met the population requirements. Additional requirements related to the project. Most of these pieces we're going to get into in the actual application, but it's essentially just ensuring that the application does meet the intent and requirements of this grant. So all of these pieces are pieces that will be included in your application questions. Use of funds. The Rural Innovation Grant is very flexible in the use of funds. So it can be both hard or soft costs. And last year we did fund a combination of both. So if it's soft costs, that would be something like programming. So if you are spreading a program, either taking it to the next level, taking it to another community, those programming costs could be an eligible expense. You can also build something. So you could build a building or a playground, or destroy something, or purchase equipment. All of those things also eligible expenses. On the flip side, ineligible is usually pretty straightforward, but some things to note. No really kind of ongoing maintenance type work would qualify for this. But I would say prizes and awards are the thing that come up the most in some of our applications. So those would not be eligible use of funds. So if you do have some kind of a program and there is a winner, you cannot use either for match or your grant an award for that winner, even if it is part of a program that is supported through this grant. These are additional kind of eligibility qualifications that we will look at prior to giving applications that have been submitted to the review panel. One to note on here is that if the entity applying is not a either city or county government, then the applicant does need to include we call it a letter of support. It's also essentially more of a letter of awareness. We just want to make sure that if a project is going to happen in a city, or if it's in an unincorporated area, then in the county, that governing entity is aware of the fact that that project has been applied for funding. So there does not need to be any formal partnership. There does not need to be any financial commitment. We're just looking for general awareness in the form of a letter. Now we're going to talk a little bit more about the application itself and the scoring rubric. As I mentioned, application is in iowagrants.gov. That is the only place you can submit. The rubric is on a scale of 85 points. We do give extra consideration for 3 different categories, 5 points each. So one is if it's a project that has been endorsed by Iowa Great Places Citizens Advisory Board. Also projects that are located in a community of 5,000 or fewer. And finally, projects that are scaling up a former rural innovation grantee project. So while that is not a requirement, that is kind of where this program came from, was the desire to spread those rural innovation grants. So we give some extra points if that's the case, but none of those are requirements. They are all just some bonus points. Something to keep in mind as you are working through the application is that the review panel is going to be using the scoring rubric that is located on the last couple pages of the guidelines. So it would behoove you to also look at the guidelines when you are completing your application questions, just to make sure that they reflect what the guidelines or what the scoring rubric is going to be looking for. You will see on the next few slides that many of the questions match up directly with the scoring rubric. So it's pretty easy to see what the review panel is going to be looking for. So the first section is actually unscored, and this is essentially a project proposal. So a discussion of what the project is going to be, how it connects to Empower Iowa, and the goal to have vibrant and sustainable rural communities. Impact, kind of just a general encapsulation of your project. The first scored section is the demonstrated need. So we want you to talk a little bit about what this project is going to be solving, if you will, what the challenge is in the community, what the needs are, and how this is a good solution. Note that the due diligence section is worth 15 points. So all of the other scoring rubric categories are worth 5 points each. But this one is weighted heavily because this is a really big component of the scale up. We really want the applicants to do some research on either if they are the ones scaling up their own effort, kind of what they have learned, lessons learned, what they're going to maybe do differently on the scale up versus when they first started. On the flip side, if you are going to be implementing what another community did, we want you to actually go meet with them and talk with whomever launched or initiated that project or program. Go chat with them about what they learned, what worked well, and what you might do differently when you bring that project to your community. Implementation. This is something we touched on briefly when you're talking about your timeline, making sure that it's within the contract period. The more detail you can give, the better. There are no bonus points, you'll notice, for getting it done in the first couple months. So make sure your timeline is also realistic. It is okay to, take more of the time in your contract period as long as you are able to realistically complete the project within that time frame, which would be having it all done by June 30th of 2025. Evaluation. This is a reflection on both the goals that you have for this project, making sure they are measurable, and then talking a little bit about how you will be collecting those measurements, looking both at qualitative and quantitative metrics to gauge success. We understand that sometimes this can be challenging for some types of projects, and there's a lot of variety within the Rural Scale Up Grant. But we do encourage you to be creative and to really kind of think about how you are going to know if this project that you are proposing is a success in your community or region. Partners. This one is pretty straightforward, just an opportunity to share who is involved in this project. You can include a combination of logistical and financial partners here. Just clearly explain what their role is, so how they're involved, what they are responsible for, pieces like that. Stronger responses will have a wider variety of partners, or a maybe interesting combination of partners. So it's more about quality and creativeness than it is about necessarily a laundry list of everyone who might be active and touch it. For the budget portion, I will give example numbers here, but you will just be plugging into a table through Iowa grants. So the requested amount could be a maximum of 20,000. So we'll say 20,000. In that case, your cash match amount would need to be at least 10,000. It could be more if your project is more than 30,000. You might want to consider where that gap is going to be if you do have additional match. We sometimes have submissions where the budget table is filled out to just include 20,000 and then 10,000, but then there might be an uploaded document of the project proposal costs and it's 65,000 and there's concern there. So make sure that you kind of address and include what the full cost of the project is, how much you're asking for the grant, how much you currently have for match. And if there is a gap, make sure you address that somewhere as far as what your plans are for either additional funding resources or how you're going to make sure the project actually happens. Supplemental project costs, that would be anything that cannot be captured through the grant or through cash match. So it could be things like in kind, or it could be costs that are outside of the contract period. And then the total project cost would be the sum of those three. There is another budget section, but first I'm going to talk about use of funds. So use of funds, again, you will be filling out as a table on Iowa grants. So you will essentially, for example, say construction costs, and you'll be able to indicate how much of those costs are going to be from the match or from the grant or from supplemental. You can be as detailed as you want. And break it down in whatever way makes sense for your project. Again, because of the variety of projects, it's kind of hard to give a lot of detail here, but we just want to make sure that it is clear to the panel kind of what the different areas are where the funding is going to be spent. And if you have additional questions about that or want to make sure that you're breaking it down far enough, I am happy to answer any questions. Just give me a call or send me an email as you get down the road and you're filling out this section. And then source of matching funds. So we do require an actual upload document. I'm going to stress this because last year we had quite a few ineligible applications because they did not upload a document. So even if you are the city and you are applying as the city and the city is going to provide the cash match, you still need to upload a document that is either from the mayor or the city clerk or a resolution from the city council, or a copy of the budget with the line item highlighted that indicates that the funds are there and to be used for this project. If your matching source is from a nonprofit, then a letter from a executive director or the president or something that says the funds are there, that would count. Or again, a budget line item where it's indicated on there that the funds are available. We just need an actual physical document to be uploaded to meet the eligibility requirements for that portion. Stronger applications will receive more points if they have a just local match, and even more so if it is a variety of sources for that local match. So say, for example, both the city and a local nonprofit and maybe a business all provide a portion of the match. That would be a very strong application. But you could use another state grant, you could use a federal grant. Those are not eligibility issues. It's just will strengthen your application if they are local sources. For media support material, this could include things like letters of support. So especially if you have partners that you have indicated are really involved, or any specific users, potential users of whatever the project or program or initiative is, those would be good letters of support. For additional material, if it's something that's built, you might have design or engineering. If it is, or maybe photos even, if it's something like that. If it's a program related, you might have kind of a program framework. Any documents that you think would create a more complete picture of the project for the panel would be what you should be uploading here. And then finally, we have the grantsmanship and case for support section. So this one is essentially a catch-all opportunity for the review panel to think about the application as a whole and if it made a great case for support. This could be either kind of based on the quality of the enthusiasm and the project for the community. It could also get into things like, did the answers really respond to the question, and were there a lot of typos? So this category kind of captures all of that, and is just a great way for the panelists to provide their kind of final feelings for the application. So that is the run through of the kind of grant guidelines and scoring rubric, application, eligibility pieces for the Rural Scale Up Grant. Again, this is the second year we've had this one, so we learned a lot last year, but it's still pretty similar to the way it was last year. If you have any questions, you can either drop them in the chat now or take yourself off mute, and I'm happy to help. Okay, well, I won't hold you unnecessarily. Thank you so much for your interest in the program. As you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. Otherwise, I will be sending you a copy of the recording, and I look forward to receiving your applications. Have a great rest of your day.